The Earth has been doing a lot of moving and shaking lately, leaving behind huge cracks and fissures. To add a little more stress to our lives, now we have to worry about a new crack that could destroy the Atlantic Ocean, rip California away, or break Africa in half. The China fissures. Have you seen this? In recent weeks, footage has been circulating on the internet of an enormous rupture in the surface of the Earth. Videos have been claiming the footage shows a huge crack that opened during the devastating earthquake that just happened in Turkey. However, the images have nothing to do with Turkey. This massive split in the Earth is river erosion from China. Just because it's not from an earthquake doesn't mean it's less important. It's just as dramatic as the pictures suggest. The erosion has created what looks like a vast valley stretching across farmland as far as the eye can see. It's a real geological feature, it just doesn't have anything to do with an earthquake. Steve Gao from the Missouri University of Science and Technology said the crack in the recent videos is from Pinglu County in Shanxi Province. It's not a crack as much as it is a fluvial incision. The narrow channel cutting across farmland was created by river erosion. This part of China, known as the Loess Plateau, is covered in ancient layers of dust from the Ice Age. All the dust buried beneath the soil erodes extremely easily. What you're seeing here is the result of ancient sediments being eroded inside the remains of a dried riverbed that likely ran through a pre-existing fracture in the crust. The Atlantic Ocean gone. There is a crack in the Earth's crust so big and so dangerous it could cause the entire Atlantic Ocean to vanish. The crack is currently threatening to pull North America and Europe into one another, erasing the Atlantic Ocean from existence. Researchers from the University of Lisbon were behind the new discovery. They were creating a map of the sea floor off the coast of Portugal when they uncovered the break. It's a fissure that appears to be the beginning of an entirely new subduction zone. Scientists believe the new subduction zone will begin a cycle that fuses the two continents together into a single landmass known as a supercontinent. This is something that's happened a couple times before. In the last 4 billion years, supercontinents have formed, split into smaller continents, and then reformed at least 3 times. One of the researchers from the university, João Duarte, told National Geographic the continents could form another Pangea in the future. That's because the crack in the ocean appears to be the Eurasian plate breaking in two. Don't get too excited yet, though. You aren't going to be driving from New York to Spain during your lifetime. Although the crack is gigantic, about 186 miles long, it's not going to affect anything yet. Scientists say it could take 220 million years for Europe and North America to crash into each other. And now for number 8. But first, it's shout-out time. I want to give a big thank you to James Hyde and Solomon999 for supporting this channel. Thank you so much. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. The Kenya crack. Africa is slowly splitting in two, but is it because of a crack? A huge crack was spotted in the Kenyan Rift Valley in 2018. It became an international news story because of the scope of the crack. It was a seemingly bottomless chasm that opened in the middle of Africa for no obvious reason. Since there was no immediate cause for what split the Earth in two, scientists could only speculate. The first reports that came out claimed the crack was evidence that Earth was breaking in half. However, it's been 5 years since it was discovered, and scientists think they know exactly what created it. The crack in Kenya was almost definitely the result of erosion. Heavy rains caused the soil underneath the surface to erode. Rainwater washed out loose deposits of volcanic ash that had been hiding underneath the surface for thousands of years. Then, with just the slightest bit of tectonic activity, the ground split open to reveal an abyss. Though to be honest, that might be a little dramatic. The Kenyan crack is more of a gully than a bottomless pit. Africa splitting in two. The crack in Kenya may have gained the headlines, but it's hardly the most exciting crevice in Africa. In 2005, an enormous rift appeared in the Ethiopian desert that is currently a staggering 35 miles long. It's only getting bigger as it rends Africa in two. Tectonic plates are shifting beneath Ethiopia, slowly cutting the African continent in half. The Somalian tectonic plate is separating from the Nubian tectonic plate. The separation has created a split so big, it has its own name. Scientists call it the East African Rift. It's a phenomenon that hasn't been seen since South America and Africa split into two different continents millions of years ago. How exactly is this going to play out in the long run? First, the world will gain a new ocean. As the rift continues to grow, it's inevitable that water will start pouring into it. This is a process that will take millions of years, but it's already underway now. Water will gradually fill the rift as the two pieces of land get farther and farther apart. A new ocean will form, and when the plates stop moving, there will be two new continents where Africa used to be. Ken McDonald from the University of California says water from the Red Sea will pour into the East African Rift Valley to become a new ocean. When this happens, landlocked countries like Ethiopia and Uganda will suddenly find themselves with beachfront properties. But like I said already, it's going to take a long time. Don't expect any beachfront investments to pay off for another 10 million years or so. Breaking the Bighorn. An enormous crack appeared on a ranch in the foothills of the Bighorn Mountains in 2015. The crack is so enormous, it was nicknamed the Gash. The discovery was made by a group of guides who had a few camps on the ranch. They go out to the camps every year to hunt, as they've been doing for decades. But when they went out this time, they found the landscape had changed. A humongous gash-like fissure had opened across the foothills about 6 football fields in length. The guides were concerned enough that they brought an engineer to take a look. It turned out water from a nearby spring had covered the rock, which caused the land to suddenly shift in one direction. There wasn't any seismic activity. The whole thing was caused by groundwater. Geologist Tom Dreen said these types of slides happen all the time in Wyoming. Normally, they're small and don't do any damage. In this case, the slide happened in an area with no people, so nobody got hurt. But what if a crack were to open in a populated place? The U.S. is pumping so much groundwater that all across the American Southwest, fissures like the one in Wyoming are opening all the time. Massive cracks have appeared in Utah, Arizona, and California. Some of them are miles long, while some are little more than shallow gullies. Most of them are in the desert, but you just never know where a crack might randomly appear to swallow a small town. Geologists say the cracks are because people are pumping out groundwater faster than the planet can replenish the underground aquifers. This is causing the ground beneath the Southwest to get super dry and occasionally crack open. Arizona has been monitoring the issue since 2002. According to the Arizona Geological Survey, there are roughly 169 miles of cracks right now in their state alone. Breaking the seafloor. In 2011, a megaquake rocked Japan. It was an astounding 9.0 on the Richter scale. Those who were around back then most likely remember the devastation. It was one of the worst natural disasters in modern human history. The earthquake shook the continental side of the Japan Trench, rupturing the crust itself. The rupture generated a tsunami, which killed 20,000 people. This was hardly more than a decade ago. After the earthquake, scientists went down to study the seafloor. Researchers from Kyoto University in Japan used a manned submersible vessel to descend to the epicenter of the quake. At a depth of roughly 17,500 feet, they came across a series of fissures. Some of them were 3 feet across, others were 6 feet across. The force of the earthquake created dozens of positively enormous cracks in the sea floor. If this had been in a city, that whole city would have been reduced to rubble without a doubt. The Japanese scientists determined the crust ruptured 12 miles underneath the planet's surface. Even though the rupture was so deep, its power was enough that it broke open the surface. That's the kind of unimaginable strength that earthquakes can produce. The Silfra Rift. The Silfra Rift is an enormous fissure in Iceland that's part of the larger Atlantic Rift. The Atlantic Rift is the line that divides Europe and America. It's a whopping crack in the Earth's surface where the continental plates rub up against each other. Nobody sees this crack because it's way at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. But in Iceland, you can very clearly see the Silfra Rift in the crystal clear meltwater. Iceland is cut in half by the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. A line runs through the island country with the North American plate on the western side and the Eurasian plate on the eastern side. Each year, these two plates drift about 2 centimeters further apart. Every 10 years or so, there's a big earthquake that relieves the tension between the plates. The earthquakes also cause new cracks and fissures to form across the valleys of Iceland. The Silfra Rift is unique because it's a huge crack filled with meltwater from Iceland's glaciers. It's one of the most superb snorkeling places anywhere in the world. You can snorkel through the narrow channel with one hand touching the North American plate and the other hand touching the Eurasian plate. In a few million years, if the division continues, the Silfra Rift will simply be part of the ocean, and Iceland will be completely cut in half. Have you ever seen a crack in the earth like this up close? Let us know in the comments, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. The Mojave Crack. In July 2019, a 7.1 magnitude earthquake rocked Southern California. It didn't kill anyone, and there wasn't any truly devastating damage. But when looking at satellite images of the Mojave Desert taken before and after the earthquake, you can see the earthquake did create a fissure in the earth. One satellite image from July 4th shows the desert looking perfectly normal. Another satellite image from 2 days later, after the earthquake, shows a crack so big it can be seen from space. The crack appears to have occurred at the epicenter of the quake, 11 miles from Ridgecrest. The crack goes all the way through the Mojave Desert to the highway. It's only about 2 inches in some places, but runs much deeper in a few sections. It's now become a tourist attraction as Californians go to snap selfies with the crack. It was very lucky the earthquake happened far from civilization. If this type of crack suddenly appeared in a populated city, it would cause unprecedented damage. Scientists say it's only a matter of time before California experiences the big one, which could create a rift so massive it would swallow entire neighborhoods. The Mexican Crack. A humongous crack appeared in northwest Mexico out of the blue in 2014. The crack stretched about a mile long, 26 feet deep in some places. The enormous crevice disconnected the highway traveling between Hermosillo and the coast, giving motorists no way across. They couldn't drive around the fissure because it was so long. The crack was also about 16 feet in width, leaving no real way across in many spots without mountain climbing gear. The random crack absolutely baffled the locals, along with scientists worldwide. Some speculated the San Andreas Fault was the cause of the crack. Scientists were saying the fissure was more proof that a megaquake is on its way to the west coast. However, the giant crack may have had nothing to do with earthquakes. Geologists from the University of Sonora blamed local farmers. Farmers had recently built a levee stream, which then leaked. The leaking stream caused the ground to weaken until it collapsed. The Turkey Earthquake. On February 6, 2023, 2 extraordinarily strong earthquakes shook Turkey and Syria. It was a tragedy of immense proportions, resulting in the deaths of 50,000 people. When the quakes were over, researchers from the UK Centre for the Observation and Modelling of Earthquakes, Volcanoes and Tectonics looked at satellite images of the area. Researchers compared before and after photos, identifying 2 major ruptures left behind by the tremors. The longer of the 2 ruptures is an entirely new crack in the earth stretching 190 miles. Researchers think it formed during the first earthquake, which was 7.8 in magnitude. The second crack is about 80 miles long, likely formed during the second tremor, which was only 7.5 in magnitude. Professor Tim Wright said it's not unusual for ruptures to appear after powerful earthquakes. However, the 2 fissures in Turkey are unusually long. Tim says it's a testament to just how much energy was unleashed during this catastrophic event. The cracks are so large that many of them slither through towns, some of them moving directly through buildings. There were horizontal displacements in some areas of up to 16 feet. Californians have to live with the constant threat of a big earthquake destroying their cities. People in Turkey have to live with the same threat, only their nightmare just came true. By the end of February, the death toll in Turkey climbed to roughly 46,000. There were also a reported 7,259 deaths in Syria. Not only did the earthquake kill people, but it also injured thousands more, and made an unprecedented number of people homeless. 14 million people were affected by the quake in some way. What makes Turkey so dangerous is the fact that it sits on 3 tectonic plates. The Anatolian, Arabian, and African plates meet underneath Turkey. As they bump and grind against each other, they unleash devastating power. This particular quake was only 7.8 on the Richter scale. If it had been a 9.0 like the one that struck off the coast of Japan, the damage could have been even worse, and the fissures in the earth even deeper. Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
What is magnitude 10? A magnitude 10 earthquake would mean complete disaster. Most scientists agree that it can never happen, but what if it did? To understand the consequences of a magnitude 10 earthquake, we must first need to know what a magnitude earthquake is. The strength of earthquakes are measured using the Richter magnitude scale. An earthquake measuring 8.0 to 8.9 could cause extreme damage in an area hundreds of kilometers from the epicenter of where it occurs. A 9.0 to 9.9 can wreak havoc on an area of thousands of kilometers, which is what happened in 2011 in Japan. The epicenter of the 9.0 quake was about 80 miles east of the city of Sendai and 18.6 miles below the ocean floor. Part of a trench actually ruptured with the force, leading to several destructive tsunamis that raced out at 500 miles per hour, with the waves even hitting the coast of Antarctica, causing a portion of an ice shelf to break off. The official death toll was around 18,500 people, with billions of dollars in damage and a critical nuclear emergency. So with all of this mass chaos and destruction, what would happen if a magnitude 10 earthquake hit? The Richter scale doesn't even go that high. A magnitude 10 earthquake is roughly 10 times larger than a magnitude 9. Not just 1 point larger, 10 times larger. In 1960, the biggest earthquake in recorded history struck Chile. This earthquake went down on what is known as a subduction zone, the Peru-Chile Trench. A subduction zone is a fault created by a tectonic plate diving beneath another tectonic plate and sticking into the mantle. As the plate slides underneath, the plate on top remains locked in place, which creates enormous strain. The strain builds up until the plate buckles under the pressure. The subduction zone snaps and an earthquake occurs. These types of earthquakes are huge because of the surface area involved in the snap. In the 1960 earthquake in Chile, a section of the fault line over 625 miles long was ruptured. Between the quake and the tsunamis, 6,000 people died. This earthquake measured 9.5 on the outdated Richter scale. The scale doesn't work that well because it is based on ground displacement and doesn't really measure very large earthquakes. A magnitude 10 would be so much larger that the area of fault line that would need to rupture must be around 3,000 miles long. In most earthquakes, the shaking only lasts for about 2 minutes. With a magnitude 10 and a fault of over 3,000 miles, we are looking at shaking lasting upwards of 20 minutes. This would create complete and total destruction. Bye-bye, California. We now know that a magnitude 10 earthquake could cause the entire Earth to literally quake in its boots for around 20 minutes. What would that mean for California if the earthquake were to theoretically occur on the Hayward Fault, for example, located in San Francisco Bay? Scientists have put forth a hypothetical scenario based on a magnitude 7 earthquake happening here, an earthquake that they say is pretty much inevitable. A 7 could happen any day now, a 10 maybe not so much. The report from the U.S. Geological Survey estimated at least 800 casualties and 18,000 injured. But that's not even counting the people who would die from fires while gas lines exploded, or those tumbling off bridges and being crushed under falling buildings. A magnitude 7 would cause at least 8,000 structures to collapse and 100,000 structures to be condemned. But what if we juice it up to a magnitude 10? We could be looking at the complete destruction of California as we know it. There are about 7 million people in the region and 2 million living on top of the fault. If an earthquake hit with the power of a magnitude 10, roads would turn into ribbons of liquid concrete, cracks in the earth would open, every single building along the coast would be reduced to ruins, likely resulting in at least 2 million deaths, and California becoming an uninhabitable zone like something out of a science fiction novel. And this is even without taking into account any tsunamis, foreshocks, aftershocks, etc. Much of California would probably be gone with a new coastline established. The 9.0 earthquake that hit Chile in 2010 caused surprising and substantial changes to the coastline. Land levels changed, the shoreline changed, and beaches sank, changing the entire ecosystem. At 10 in California, all the cities and housing along the shoreline would be completely destroyed. The question would be, what would it look like afterwards? Crumbling mountain. In 2016, an earthquake of magnitude 6.6 flattened a town in Italy and shattered part of a mountain. This historic Italian town was literally leveled, and since then lies in ruins. The buildings were destroyed and 2 iconic churches were smashed into dust. It was the largest earthquake in Italy since 1980. Luckily, no deaths were immediately reported. But this was only a 6.6. If it had been a magnitude 10 earthquake, the city still would have been liquefied, and there's a possibility that the nearby mountain could have actually split open. This is one of the biggest risks when an earthquake occurs in a mountainous region. Something as powerful as a magnitude 10 would be like a giant smashing the mountains with a great hammer, causing landslides as the mountains crumbled and broke. These landslides could easily bury entire cities and reduce mountains to piles of rubble, like kicking in an anthill. And to make matters worse for Italy, the United States Geological Survey suggested the earthquake loosened the region's fault lines, making it easier for more severe earthquakes to occur in the future. World-ending tsunamis. On December 26, 2004, a magnitude 9.1 earthquake snapped the 900-mile-long fault line where the Australian and Indian tectonic plates converge. The powerful quake happened underwater and caused one of the most devastating tsunamis in recorded history. The powerful undersea quake set off a tsunami that crashed into Indonesia with a wave over 100 feet high. It was only the first of many waves. The sea level rose immediately by 100 feet. That first giant wave killed 100,000 people. The tsunamis then crashed into Thailand, India, and Sri Lanka, killing tens of thousands of people, relaxing the day after Christmas. The brutal tsunami didn't stop until it hit the coast of South Africa. Within just a few hours, 230,000 people were dead. It was the worst earthquake disaster in modern history. They even made a movie about it with Tom Holland and Ewan McGregor. Now let's step that same scenario up to a magnitude 10. If a magnitude 9 on the Richter scale is equal to releasing the energy of 25,000 nuclear bombs, a magnitude 10 is equal to releasing the energy of at least 400,000 nuclear bombs. We can at least double the size of the tsunami waves, creating walls of water over 200 feet, wiping out a much larger area of the land. We could also jack up the speed of the water. In 2004, the earthquake pushed the waves across the Indian Ocean at about 500 miles per hour. We can easily double that to 1,000 miles per hour, giving the waves enough force to basically wipe out all of Indonesia, Thailand, and everything else in its path. And now for number 6. But first, are you prepared in case an earthquake hits? If not, be sure to learn what you need to do. You never know when one might hit. Crack open the planet? Could an earthquake actually crack the planet open? Most scientists agree that even the most powerful earthquake couldn't actually break a hole open in the surface of the Earth or crack the planet in half. These are things that just can't happen. You have to remember that the Earth's crust is already cracked open. The average continental crust is about 22 miles thick, with oceanic crusts only being about 5.6 miles thick. Fault networks go at least 375 miles deep. This means all the pieces of crust and the tectonic plates are cracked in one way or another, making it impossible to crack them even further. Remember that an earthquake is basically just 2 giant plates of rock rubbing against each other. The surface of the Earth might be ravaged, but the inside of the planet will be perfectly fine. It's also important to know that the mantle beneath it all cannot be cracked no matter how intense the earthquake is. The mantle is solid. It's also so hot that if something were to split the mantle open, boiling hot material would rush immediately into the gap and solidify it again. There is no way to break through the mantle of the Earth. Or is there? For an earthquake to generate enough energy to shatter the crust beneath our feet, we would need a mega earthquake with a magnitude of at least 12.8. The good news is that nothing like this could ever happen, since no natural force on Earth is strong enough to generate that power. The Yellowstone volcano. If a magnitude 10 earthquake were to occur anywhere near the Yellowstone supervolcano, the United States could be plunged into darkness. Yellowstone has not erupted in a serious way for 640,000 years. Today, the chance of Yellowstone erupting and blanketing all of America in ash is about 1 in 730,000, according to the United States Geological Survey. There is a better chance of Yellowstone erupting than you winning the lottery. Let that sink in for a minute. But when it comes to earthquakes, they could speed things up a bit. Earthquakes don't trigger explosions or volcanic activity. However, earthquakes can trigger changes in the behavior of geysers. All the shaking inside the earth can cause disruptions in the hot springs and geysers around Yellowstone, building up heat inside the volcano's magma chambers. If enough heat were to build up inside of these chambers, an eruption could occur. And in the case of a massive magnitude 10 earthquake, there would definitely be some serious disruption and probably quite a bit of heat displacement. Not only would the whole area be devastated by the biggest earthquake ever, but it would probably finish off with Yellowstone blowing its top as the worst volcanic eruption since humans walked the earth. Have you ever been to Yellowstone? How was it? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to Origins Explained if you haven't already for more videos about discoveries, archaeology, and of course, our planet. Lost like Atlantis. Some people think an earthquake of colossal proportions is responsible for the utopian kingdom of Atlantis sinking deep into the ocean and never being found again. Atlantis was first mentioned by the Greek philosopher Plato over 2,300 years ago. Plato detailed a kingdom of paradise lost. He also claimed that Atlantis was destroyed by fire and earthquakes, fueling modern-day scientists and geologists to look into Earth's geological history for clues as to the truth of Plato's claims. One popular theory is that Atlantis may have been destroyed during a volcanic eruption that wiped out the ancient Greek island of Thera, which is modern-day Santorini. This is a real event that occurred. However, it happened at least 1,300 years before Plato, making it a hard nut to swallow. It is possible that a mega-earthquake did happen during Plato's time alive, as he was of course living in a very tectonically active part of the planet. Atlantis could have been one of the Greek islands that liquefied into the sea, being buried so violently that no trace has ever been found. Swallowed cities and liquefaction. Ordinary earthquakes cause something known as liquefaction. When a magnitude 6.3 earthquake struck New Zealand in February of 2011, liquefaction caused vehicles to be sucked into the road and sewer lines to snap. Earthquakes literally liquefy the surface of the earth. Similar things happened in 1964, when the earthquake in Niigata, Japan toppled buildings as the soil underneath them liquefied and became unstable. And again in 1906 in San Francisco, liquefaction of the ground ruptured water lines, making it impossible for firefighters to put out the fires. But liquefaction can do so much more. An earthquake in Indonesia in 2018 swallowed an entire village. Liquefaction or liquefaction happens when the ground shakes so hard and for so long that it creates enough pressure to liquefy the soil and sediment. Think about your hardwood floor shaking so hard that it turns into jello. Your table would move across the floor, the garbage can would tip over, you wouldn't be able to stand. Plus, your kitchen would probably fall through the floor as it liquefied and broke open. The famous pirate city of Port Royal, Jamaica was destroyed in 1692 when it was hit by a 7.7 magnitude earthquake. It was a haven for piracy and debauchery, and it was known as the most wicked and sinful city in the world. When the earthquake hit, the land turned to liquid, causing buildings to sink into the ground, some completely disappearing. Other nearby towns were also completely demolished, and about 7,000 people lost their lives. It was seen as an instance of God Almighty's severe judgment. Liquefaction happens during an earthquake that lasts for 30 to 60 seconds. In the case of a magnitude 10, you could expect it to intensify by a lot. With an earthquake lasting for upwards of 10 minutes, the liquefaction would turn the ground to quicksand, easily swallowing buildings and knocking skyscrapers sideways. Nobody would be safe. Changing the Earth's rotation. Earthquakes don't just damage things superficially. They don't only flatten cities, cause towering tsunamis, or break mountains apart. A big enough earthquake can have an effect across the entire planet. For example, like I mentioned, the 2011 Tohoku earthquake that ravaged Japan unleashed a 120-foot tsunami that killed thousands and caused a meltdown at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. It was rated a 9.0 and was the largest recorded earthquake that ever hit Japan. But the effects of the 2011 earthquake go way beyond Japan. Its effects were felt in northern Russia and Beijing, China. Seismic waves caused icebergs to break apart in Antarctica. Waves crashed in Norwegian fjords. Tsunami wreckage even made it all the way to the coastline of North America. Oh yes, and according to Earth Observatory, the earthquake shifted the planet's axis by 17 centimeters and shortened days on Earth by 1.8 microseconds. The planet wasn't knocked off its axis. Instead, the earthquake was so destructive that it redistributed the Earth's mass. By doing this, it moved the figure axis, which is where the mass of the planet is balanced. This sped up the Earth's rotation. Increase the power of that earthquake to magnitude 10, and the Earth could speed up significantly. This wouldn't have a really meaningful impact, unless of course the earthquake was so devastating that days were shortened by an hour, and the planet started spinning so fast that the water in our oceans was pulled towards the equator, drowning millions of people. But again, this is all hypothetical. How possible is it? A magnitude 10 earthquake could happen at any second. It is very unlikely, but it could happen. The Japan Times reported that a researcher named Toru Matsuzawa from Tohoku University warned the Coordinating Committee for Earthquake Prediction in Japan that something even more powerful than the 2011 earthquake could be imminent. This researcher warned that the energy of a magnitude 10 would surpass the most recent devastation of the March 11th Tohoku tsunami by at least 30 times. This could happen if all the combined faults from the Japan Trench to the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench moved by 180 feet. The event is unlikely, but it could still happen. If this did happen in Japan, the country would probably be gone. Ground motions would continue for over an hour, and tsunamis would be crashing into the country while the shaking was still happening. Tsunami waves would continue for days on end, making rescue impossible and drowning everyone on the coast, including those in the nearby Pacific Rim nations. Thanks for watching. Are you nervous about the next big earthquake? Do you know what to do in case of an emergency? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.